Hello everyone and welcome to my B&B Fan Club channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Steffy Forrester sat on the edge of her cell's thin, sagging mattress, hands clutched tightly in her lap, manicured nails cutting into her palms. The orange jumpsuit felt strange against her flesh, a sharp contrast to the fitted expensive gown she was used to. Her dark hair, which typically cascaded in lovely waves, was pulled back into a sloppy ponytail, strands sticking to her sweaty forehead. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face, which was marked by a mix of defiance and fear. She had not intended for it to come to this. Not really. The plan had been desperate, formed out of blinding wrath and panic, but it was not supposed to finish with her handcuffed and staring at the chipped gray walls of a jail. Steffy had always been a fighter, determined to preserve her family and legacy at any costs. However, this time the cost was beyond expensive. Hiring someone to murder Luna Nozawa in prison. Her mind recoiled at the concept, as if saying it aloud would make it true. She didn't want Luna dead at first. It was about survival, safeguarding the Forrester empire, and keeping secrets hidden. But secrets, as Steffy had discovered over the years, had a way of clawing their way to the surface. Across town in the vast Spencer mansion, Bill Spencer sat alone in his study, a glass of whiskey still on the desk before him. His broad shoulders were bowed, with his face buried in his hands. The room was dark, save for the soft glow of a solitary bulb that illuminated the framed images on his desk, photos of his sons, Liam and Wyatt, and a little recently added portrait of Luna, his daughter. The word still felt unfamiliar, as if it were a language he had yet to master. He only found out the truth a few weeks ago, thanks to a weeping Katie Logan, who had pieced together hints from a long-ago romance. Luna, the brilliant, ambitious young woman who had worked her way up at Forrester Creations, was his flesh and blood. And now she was gone, or so he feared. Bill's chest ached with a grief so raw that it felt like it would rip him apart. He hadn't spent enough time with her. He hadn't had the opportunity to be her father, to make up for the years he'd missed, the birthdays and milestones robbed by ignorance. The news of Steffy's detention came as a second blow, crushing what little hope he had left. Steffy, his friend, confidant, and the woman he had trusted through innumerable storms, had organized a scheme to murder Luna. The betrayal sliced deeper than he could have imagined, a dagger twisted by the realization that Luna was in danger because of him, because of the complex web of lies that seemed to characterize his life. Steffy's mind raced within the jail, revisiting the events that had brought her there. Luna had always been an issue, a wild card in the tightly regulated world of Forrester Creations. She was intelligent, undoubtedly, but she was overly ambitious and ready to show herself. When Luna discovered evidence of Steffy's involvement in a fraudulent business arrangement that could have lost Forrester millions of dollars and destroyed their reputation, she became a threat. Steffy had tried to reason with her, to purchase her silence, but Luna was strong and principled in an almost naive manner. She had threatened to go public, to reveal the truth, and Steffy couldn't allow that happen. Not to her family, not to her firm. The notion to employ someone came from a dark place in Steffy's head, one she scarcely recognized. She contacted someone from her past, someone who worked in the shadows and could make things go away. The plan was simple. Shock Luna and make her back off. But something went wrong. Terribly wrong. The hitman was apprehended before he could act, and his confession led directly back to Steffy. She was now facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder, and the consequences of her conduct pressed down on her like a physical force. Steffy's thoughts were interrupted by the echo of footsteps down the corridor. A guard appeared at the cell door, his expression unchanging. "Forrester, you've got a visitor," he announced, unlocking the door with a heavy clank. She stood, adjusting her jumpsuit as if it were a silk blouse, and followed the guard into the visitation room. Her heart beat as she pondered who it might be. Ridge, her father, pleading for her to explain herself? Is Hope, her adversary, gloating at her downfall? Or perhaps Finn, her husband, whose absence over the last few days had been a wound in its own right. When she entered the visitation room, she froze. It was Bill. His eyes, which were typically piercing and authoritative, were red-rimmed and hollow. He stood behind the scratched plexiglass partition, fists locked at his sides. For a period, neither of them spoke. The air between them bristled with unsaid accusations, and years of confidence had been shattered. "Bill," Steffi whispered, barely above a whisper. She sat down, her trembling hands gripping the chair's edge. "Why, Steffi?" His voice was low and raw, like gravel grinding underfoot. "Why are you doing this?" She swallowed forcefully, her throat dry. "I did not intend for it to go this far. I just needed to protect my family. Luna was about to ruin us." "Ruin you?" Bill's voice raised sharply with incredulity. "She was my daughter, Steffi. My daughter. And you attempted to have her killed." The word struck her like a physical blow, and she flinched. "I didn't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I did not realize she was yours." Bill shook his head and tightened his jaw, saying, "Not until it was too late. That does not change what you did. You made a choice. You crossed the line, and now—" His voice cracked and he looked away, his eyes streaming. "Now I may lose her. Because of you." Steffi's chest clenched, guilt and terror combining. "Is she okay?" she inquired, dreading the outcome. Bill's silence was sufficient. He leaned forward, his hands placed against the divider, as if he could reach through to shake her. "She is currently in protective care, no thanks to you. But she is afraid, Steffi. She's alone and terrified, and I can't do anything to assist her." Steffi's eyes welled up with tears, but she held them back. She couldn't afford to shatter now, especially in front of him. "I'm sorry," she muttered, her words feeling insufficient, like attempting to mend a sinking ship with a bandage. "I've never wanted this. I never intended to hurt you." Bill laughed bitterly, hollowly. "Hurt me? You did not only harm me, Steffi. You broke me. You ruined my family. And for what? Power? Control? What is the Forrester name?" He shook his head, disdain written across every line of his face. "I thought you were better than this." Steffi's tears were hot and irrepressible now. "I thought I was too," she said quietly. "But Bill, I was afraid. I was afraid of losing everything. My family, my business, and my life." "She was my daughter," Bill said softly, but the impact was still heartbreaking. "She deserved better. From you. From me. From all of us." When the guard signaled that their time was over, Bill stood, his motions heavy, as if the weight of his grief had sunk in his bones. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he replied, his gaze locked on hers. "But I hope you can live with this. Because I'm not sure if I can." He turned and walked away, leaving Steffi alone with the echo of his words. She sat there, staring at the empty space where he had been, her hands trembling in her lap. For the first time in her life, Steffi felt completely alone. Days passed into weeks, and life outside the jail continued on. But Steffi felt trapped in a purgatory of her own choosing. Her trial loomed on the horizon, a phantom she could not avoid. Her lawyer, Claire, had warned her that the evidence was damning. The hitman had kept track of texts, voicemails, and payments that could be tracked back to a bogus account Steffi thought she had covered. Claire was negotiating a plea offer, but the prosecution insisted on the maximum sentence. The conspiracy to commit murder resulted in years, if not decades, in prison. Steffi's family gathered around her, but their support was weak and tinged with sadness. Rich paid frequent visits, his face creased with worry, his words guarded but full of unsaid queries. "Why haven't you come to me?" he'd questioned during one visit, his voice full with emotion. "We could have found another way." Steffi had no response, just shame. Taylor, Steffi's mother, was more forgiving, holding her hand through the partition and murmuring words of love and faith. But Taylor's warmth couldn't take away the cold reality of what Steffi had done. Finn, her spouse, was aloof, his visits infrequent and strained. He'd always been her rock, but now she could see the fissures in his trust and the doubt in his gaze. She wondered if their marriage would survive, and if she would also lose him. Meanwhile, Bill was engaged in his own conflicts. Luna was safe, at least for the time being, kept away in a secure facility while officials investigated potential threats. But the space between them felt like a chasm. He'd attempted to contact her, sending letters and notes via her lawyer, but Luna was wary, her confidence shattered by the news of her origins and the danger that had ensued. Bill could not blame her. He had failed her like he had failed so many others throughout his life. He spent his days going through old images, trying to piece together the years he had missed. Luna's mother, whom he had briefly but strongly loved, had never told him about the pregnancy. She had reared Luna alone and kept the facts buried until her death a few years ago. Bill wondered what would have happened if he had known sooner, if he had been present for Luna's first steps, words, and heartache. Regret was a constant companion, like a shadow following him around the empty rooms of his mansion. As the sun fell below the horizon, bathing the sky in orange and purple, Bill drove to the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. It was a spot he'd visited frequently in his youth, where he'd made pledges to himself, the women he'd loved, and the family he'd created. He stood at the edge, the wind tugging on his jacket, and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Luna," he said softly, his voice swept away by the breeze. "I'm going to make it right. I promise." In the weeks that followed, Steffi's trial began, sparking a media frenzy that gathered reporters and cameras from all across the country. The headlines were scathing, portraying her as a vicious heiress eager to kill to defend her business. The truth was more complicated, but it did not sell newspapers. Steffi sat in the courtroom, hands tied, eyes locked on the floor while the prosecution presented their case. The hitman's evidence was damning. His voice was icy and detached as he described their meetings, payments, and instructions. Steffi's lawyer fought back, claiming that the plan was never intended to cause harm, and that Steffi was under extreme duress, but the jury's expressions were incomprehensible. Bill attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row, his quiet accusation. He didn't say anything to Steffi or even glance at her, but his gaze felt like a weight on her shoulders. On the third day, Luna was summoned to testify. Steffi's heart stopped as Luna took the stand, her face pallid but calm. She was stunning, Steffi recognized, with a quiet strength that reminded her of Bill. Luna's testimony was brief but heartbreaking. She described her anxiety and betrayal at learning that someone she had trusted wanted her gone. She never looked at Steffi, but her words stung worse than a glance could. When it was Steffi's turn to speak, she stood there, her voice wavering but clear. "I made a terrible mistake," she began, addressing the jury, the court, and the room full of individuals she had once considered friends, family, and allies. "I allowed fear and pride to cloud my judgment. I believed I was protecting my family, but instead I hurt the people I care about the most. I can't undo what I've done, but I swear that I never wanted Luna to die. I apologize. To Luna, Bill, and everyone." The courtroom fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of her words. Bill's expression was unreadable, but Luna's eyes sparkled with unshed tears. Steffi sat down, her hands shaking as she realized she no longer had control over her fate. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Steffi spent those days in her cell, staring at the ceiling and replaying her life like a movie she couldn't stop watching. She wondered of her children, Kelly and Hayes, who were too little to understand why their mother was not home. She thought about Finn, whose love had been her anchor but was now sliding away. She remembered Luna, a woman she hardly knew but had nearly ruined. And she thought of Bill, the man who had been her friend and partner in chaos, but was now a stranger overwhelmed with grief. When the verdict arrived, it was guilty. A murder conspiracy. 7 years with the chance of release in 5. Steffi's legs weakened as the judge read the sentence, but she forced herself to stand straight and confront the consequences of her conduct. Ridge and Taylor were in the courtroom, their expressions etched with pain. Finn was not present, and his absence spoke louder than words. As Steffi was carried away, she captured Bill's attention one final time. There was no forgiveness, only pain. She did not glance back. In the months that followed, life went on as it always did. Steffi adapted to prison life by finding small moments of redemption in routine, writing letters to her children, reading books she'd never had time for, and reflecting on the woman she had been and wanted to be. She wrote to Luna, an apology that spilled out of her in long tear-stained pages, but never received a response. Bill, meanwhile, sought to repair his connection with Luna. It was tedious, painful effort, punctuated by unpleasant conversations and cautious strides toward trust. Luna was apprehensive, her heart shattered by the realization that her own father's world had nearly killed her. But Bill remained patient, determined to show himself. He established a trust fund for her, Not as a bribe but as a promise, a vow to be there no matter how long it took. One evening as the sun sank over Los Angeles, Bill and Luna met at a quiet cafe near the shore. They sat quietly for a moment, the sound of waves filling the space between them. Finally Luna spoke. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice faint but steady. "I don't know how to be your daughter." Bill nodded, his throat hard. "I don't know how to be your father," he acknowledged. "But I want to try. If you'll let me." Luna glanced at him, her gaze searching for something, truth perhaps or love. She said nothing but leaned across the table and grabbed his hand. It was a modest gesture, but it felt like the beginning. Back in her cage, Steffi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The prison was peaceful, with the only sounds being the distant banging of doors and her cellmate's faint breathing. She thought of Bill and Luna, the family she had nearly ruined, and her own family, who awaited her on the other side of these walls. She wasn't sure if she'd ever earn their forgiveness, let alone forgive herself. But for the first time in a long time she felt a glimmer of hope, that one day she might be able to set things right. The world around her continued to turn, but Steffi closed her eyes and allowed herself to dream of a future where redemption was possible, where love could cure even the darkest scars. It was a delicate dream, but it was hers, and she clung to it with all she had. Steffi Forrester sat in the chilly, sterile interrogation room with her hands tightly shackled in front of her. The metal chair she sat in felt harsh against her injured back. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, as if the concrete held some secret she could hold to. The door creaked open and a detective entered, clutching a folder full with evidence. "Ms. Forrester," the detective started, his voice firm but authoritative, "you're under arrest for attempting to hire someone to kill Luna. Do you comprehend the charges filed against you?" Steffi swallowed hard, the lump in her throat almost choking her. Her voice came out in a whisper. "I didn't expect it to go as far as it did. I just wanted her gone. That is all." "That is not gone, Steffi," the detective stated bluntly, flicking open the folder. "This is life. You attempted to remove it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away resolutely. "I was desperate." "You believed murder would solve your problems?" the detective asked, perplexed. "Do you know how serious this is?" "I know," she muttered, her words scarcely audible. "I realize I made a mistake. I realize I can't take it back. I never wanted to hurt her. Her voice broke. She hid her face in her hands, sobbing with suppressed cries. Meanwhile, miles away in his darkly illuminated estate, Bill Spencer was slumped on the leather couch, the weight of revelation crushing him. His hands shook as he grasped the phone, a voicemail playing repeatedly in his ears. "Dad, I just realized you are my father." Bill's chest clenched. "I know this is sudden, and I don't know if I can forgive you, but I needed you to know. I'm Luna." His mind couldn't handle it. He has a daughter. His daughter. He'd been completely unaware of her presence all along, and suddenly the truth struck him like a physical blow. He slid further into the couch, tears flowing down his cheeks. He muttered, Luna, my daughter, all these years, and I didn't even know." His voice broke. The next day, Bill arrived at the prison to see Luna, his steps hesitant and heavier than the last. He entered the visitation room, where Luna sat stiffly behind the glass barrier, her eyes wide with dread, fury, and hope. "Luna," Bill said, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I promise I didn't know." Luna's lips quiver as she looked at him, hoping for truth. "Dad, how could you not know?" she queried softly, almost accusingly. "I've been waiting, hoping, and looking for you my whole life, but you weren't there. Why were you not there?" Bill's chest heaved, tears streaming down his shirt. "I do not have an excuse. I failed you. I missed every birthday, milestone, and moment of your life," Luna said. "I don't know if I can forgive you, and I can never get that back." Her voice was frail. "I just want to understand," Bill stated, swallowing hard. "I will do whatever it takes. I will be here for you." Back in the questioning room, Steffi's chest tightened with guilt as she heard about Bill's anguish. Her actions had far-reaching ramifications beyond her personal pain. She had ruined more than she could have anticipated. She had attempted to obliterate Luna, unaware that she was the child of the man she loved, or at least admired greatly. Why, Steffi? The detective inquired calmly, almost pityingly. Why are you doing this? She shook her head, tears flowing freely. I was terrified. I was frightened of losing everything and what would happen if the truth was out. I believed I was protecting myself. But I was not protecting anyone. Bill visited Steffi in jail, not as an accuser, but as a broken man due to the circumstances. He stood outside the glass looking at her, his face etched with sadness. If you want to see the second part of this, please provide feedback in the comments section.